My Voron 0.1 build with the LDO kit is coming along very well, and now I'm at the point where I'm going to be doing the wiring. And the wiring is really, I think, one of the best reasons to get this kit. It makes it a lot simpler, and they also have a supplemental website, some diagrams and information that'll help you get everything wired up really nicely. You're going to use this as a supplemental because there's still like where to do placement and things. It's got everything pretty much laid out here. And I'm going to go ahead and follow this step by step. Okay, for the first part of the electronics, we're going to mount the power supply. Before you mount it, you want to make sure that you're on the right voltage for your country. So this one was set to 230, and I'm in 115, so I went ahead and changed that. You're also going to eventually need this little DC to DC converter. And what this does is it takes the 24 volt input from the power supply and it converts it to the 5 volt for the Raspberry Pi. That way you don't need a separate power supply for the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so if you've already mounted your mini afterburner like I have, you can use 2 rolls of filament, ideally the same size, to prop it up so that way the mini afterburner doesn't get hit while you're installing this stuff. Okay, so I've kind of dry fit the power supply in the same orientation that it's in the manual. You can kind of see over here I've got it on my iPad. So you just want to fit it in there, and you're going to want to use some tape. The kit includes this kind of thinner tape. I like to use this bigger stuff, but you could just double this up, the smaller stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and use the tape I already have because I like this kind. Okay, that's about what I put on mine. This is going to be plenty. This stuff is really strong and it's tough to get off. One tip I'm going to give you is if you're having a tough time removing the edges, just get your little razor blade under here like that and lift it up. It makes it a lot easier. And then just kind of peel it back. Okay, and after you do that, you just want to flip it over, and you only really got one shot at this because if you screw it up, you're gonna have to put new tape on. But I like to get mine right in the corner. Let's see, that looks pretty good. And just press it firmly, you're good to go. All right, next up we're gonna set this buck converter, and it's gonna set in like this, and you wanna make sure that it's in the corner where this little hole is on the foot. And also now's a good time to tighten down your foot so they don't move around on you. And you're gonna use some M3 6mm to tighten this down. They're just gonna go right in here. And if you printed out your little power clip, now's a good time to test that out. It should just be able to snap right over this. And then you're going to obviously be coming back to this later to wire it up. But we're going to go ahead and mount the Pi and do the SKR mount as well next. We're going to go ahead and switch over to the LDO docks. And at this point, I don't see why you'd really need to go back and forth between the Voron 0 instruction manual and the LDO documentation, at least for the wiring part. So we're going to go ahead and stay and follow this one at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare the AC inlet next. Okay, I really like how they just have a visual of this. So you're just going to take your wires and match them up just like they say. So you're going to use these little spade terminals here. So you got your ground, your neutral, and your live. And that's how we're going to wire it up. So not too complicated. Make sure it goes all the way down. I go ahead and do the ground next. And then the neutral, or the live line, I should say. That one's probably the hardest to get because all the wires are tangled up a little bit. If you're having trouble, you can always grab a pair of pliers. There. That's all the way down. Everything looks pretty good. The other thing you might want to double check is the fuse. So you can use just a tool or something to push on this. And then just make sure your fuse is in there and that it looks good. If you see any kind of broken wire, then you know something needs to be changed. And then I believe the kit included a couple extra fuses. Just push it back in. And then just make sure, double check everything. So should have blue, brown, and this green yellow. And then I also like to double check the other connections. Kind of hard to see here. Looks like in this picture they don't have the spade terminals on there. That's all right. So you got blue and you got brown. Yep. So now we're going to go ahead and install this piece here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark 16 centimeters of this PVC conduit. We need about 16 centimeters according to the documentation. Seems about right. So it's really this hole right here. And then I'm just going to use a pair of my heavy duty scissors. And you can see a link to these in my original build videos. Just it cuts like butter. Okay, there we go. Okay, now I'm just going to cut a piece of tape, affix it to the back, and stick it down. Okay, just going to get this tape off. Use my little trick to lift the corner. And then peel it. And it should be about the same length as this, which it is. And then you just kind of aim for the middle and stick it down. That's all there is on that part. Okay, now would be a good time to install your AC inlet if you haven't already. You're going to use 2 M3/8 to install it. It's going to go right here in the corner. And there's also a little screw that will secure this foot. Make sure you have your heat insert in there. I'll go ahead and install mine. And make sure it's flush with the foot, so you might have to adjust it a little bit. And then also use an M3/8 to connect this to the heat insert. And that should secure up that foot nice and tight, which it did. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and insert the inlet. This can only really go in one way. And you don't need any screws or anything. It has these tabs. So it should fit in. Might be a little bit of a tight squeeze. And that's okay if it is. You want it in there securely. There you go. Okay, now if you look at these wires, they are labeled, which is really nice of them. So you've got N, G and D, and L, and you're going to match those up. The G and D goes to this little deal here, which is the symbol for ground. This is definitely the part that you want to double check. So I'm going to start with the ground. It's the longest wire. So the ground, which is the yellowish green one, it's going to go here. Make sure you get a nice tight connection. So you want to lock this down pretty tight. Okay. And kind of do the wiggle test, make sure it doesn't move anywhere. And then our next one is the N, or neutral. Okay. All right, this one didn't go in quite as good, so I'm going to push it back a little further. Here we go. That's better. Make sure everything's nice and tight. It is. Okay, next up I'm going to do the 2SKR. So you're going to be connecting, this is the DC side of the power supply, which is here. The red is going to go to V+, the minus is going to go to the black. One thing that I noticed about this is fairly thin wire. I would probably use something a little bigger, like about 18 or 20. This to me appears to be 22 or maybe even 24. But it should be fine since it's a pretty short run. I'm going to go ahead and loosen the top V+ for the red and the bottom V, or the top V- for the black. We're going to go ahead and insert this spade in here. Make sure you can get it all the way in and then tighten it down. Okay, that's pretty good. And the same thing on the V-. Definitely double check that you've got it connected and tightened down, just like we did on the AC side. All right, those look pretty good. Then we're just gonna go ahead and route this through right between the motor. All right, next up, I'm just gonna do this one labeled 24V in and 2.5 volt PSU, which is this guy up here. So we're going to use the other the other connections on the V plus and V minus. All right, at this point, pretty much everything on the power supply is done. Confirm that on V minus you have black only, and V plus you have red only. Double check your ground is yellow, your N is blue, and your L is brown. Once you've done all that, go ahead and put your little cover back on. Should snap right into place. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and wire these up. So you're going to match the red to the plus and the black to the minus. Make sure you're on the input side with the wiring coming from the power supply. The other side is going to, this is going to be the converted 5 volt that you need, and that's going to go directly to the Pi. So this is really no different than what we did on the original power supply, other than the size of these terminals are a little bit smaller. There we go. Just insert it all the way in. And this is pretty small wire, it's fine. This is only going to be carrying about maybe 3 amps max, not even that probably. And once again, make sure it goes all the way in. You definitely want to get these as tight as you can. Okay. All right, and then I'm just going to nicely tidy up this a little bit. So it looks like they gave me a little extra length, but that's fine. I think it's good there. There we go. Gonna keep everything nestled in right there. All right, now we're pretty much done on the bottom. Okay, now on to the doing the SKR and the electronics on the back panel. So I'm going to start out by sticking the remainder of this PVC stuff down. And you're going to go right in the middle. You can kind of use these 2 guide holes at the bottom to help you see where you need to be. And if you're like me, you might have forgot to move your nuts over to the inside, so I don't use I'm not using the umbilical zip tie strain release, so I've got this little clip that I put in. But otherwise you would have that little piece there right in the middle too, and that would help you kind of tie things up. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of dry fit them just to make sure I see where I like them. Okay, this is where I ended up sticking mine. So they're both now taped in. And from there, we're just going to start connecting stuff. The first thing is the power supply. So you're going to grab your wire loom from that, which is right here, 24 volt in. And this one's got to stretch a little bit all the way up to the top. Okay, this is where it may be useful to refer back to the original manual. But the way this is oriented, it's interesting because normally you would go in up here, but this is on the same rail here. So we're going to go ahead and do red at the top and then black here at the second terminal. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this one. You just want to loosen these spring terminals up a little bit. You may have to loosen these quite a bit to get access to the terminal. And make sure that it stays in. Do the wiggle test. And black goes right next to it. Okay, I think I got it. Yep. And now you can kind of go ahead and tuck this in if you want. This other junk out of the way too. We'll be connecting those soon, but the bigger wires on bottom is a good thing. Okay, the next thing you're going to do are these, the one that says bed heat, and those are going to go right below it. Now these are interesting because it really doesn't matter on the polarity. So the diagram in the manual has a black and red, but it's just a resistance heater, and there's no LEDs or anything, so you don't have to worry about polarity. We're going to do the same thing and just kind of bury it into this, and then just go back and double check that everything's still nice and tightened down, because you don't want these loose. Okay, next up we're going to do the bed thermistor. Hopefully you did not lose it, but there's this little JST connector, 2-pin, so you're going to need to pull that out of the bag and put it onto the end of the cable. And these don't matter which orientation because they're just a resistor at the end of the day. But you do want to make sure those little metal tabs come through this opening. There we go. There's one of them. And these are nice crimps too. Okay, and do a little jiggle test. And then, so we're back with the LDO documentation. It really doesn't matter which one you use because it's pretty much, the wiring's the same. But you can go through here, and it's the second one from the bottom. Just go ahead and plug that in. We're good to go there. Now we're just gonna kind of fit it through this. Have it come out nice and neat. Okay, next up I'm gonna do the Raspberry Pi power supply, which is here, and it's gonna connect to here. And for this one, you're gonna need your big screwdriver to loosen these up. And then this one is the negative, the one on the inside, similar to this one here. So you're gonna have them right next to each other, the negatives. Once again, make sure they can go all the way in. And snug it down real good. And the same drill with the red. And these you want to definitely make sure that you've got on the right connection, because you can cause some problems if you wire this wrong. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and wire up this. Doesn't matter which one you plug it into. Okay, and then this just goes into this little guy here, the gold-plated USB connector. Just kind of tuck this out of the way. Oops. Okay, now onto the end stops, and those are going to go here and here next to the thermistor that we already plugged in for the heated bed. Hopefully you didn't lose your other JST, but you're going to want to go ahead and plug those in. I don't believe it matters on the polarity on these either, because they're just a simple trigger. Sometimes some boards have a 3-pin end stop, and those do matter. All right, so the Z one is going to be here, and your Y one should have the JST on it. I think the reason they don't have those on there is so you can like feed the wiring easier. Because if they would have had it on like for the Z, you might not have been able to fit it through that little notch. All right, so the Y end stop goes here. All right. And now we can go ahead and route these wires in. And when you route these wires in, you're just going to want to kind of come right down and go into here and tuck them away. There's no motion that's going to be on these. They're going to be fixed. Okay, now that we've done the back, we're at the point now where we're going to do this tool head. So I like to move the tool head all the way forward so I know exactly how much loom I'm going to need to cover this. But you should have just all of your wires coming through here. And then we're going to come in here around the back, and then I'm going to put the loom on, and then I'm going to secure the loom either to if you have the 3D printed piece, you can zip tie it down there, or you can use a different strainer leaf like I've got. So pretty easy to do. The loom that it came with is really nice. It's what I call the split braid loom. So all you have to do is kind of come up, maybe check the ends. If you get a little bit of, you're going to have a little bit of these strands from where it was cut. You can clean that up with a pair of scissors if you want, but I'd probably just leave it, so you might make it worse. And then you just want to get a nice little seal around it, and then take your finger like that, and then just kind of feed it in. Bring this down a little bit. And then you should just be able to kind of feed it as you go. There's definitely a little more of an art to this. But this is just the right size of loom. I wouldn't want to go any bigger or smaller. You're not going to want to use all of it because they gave you a lot of extra, it looks like. So at some point, once we get back far enough, we're going to have to cut it with some scissors. And make sure all your wires are underneath that belt. And you may have to go down to this side. What I would recommend doing is just covering up as much as you can, and then put another zip tie on here to hold it in place. You can always add more zip ties too. You can never really have enough zip ties on a 3D printer. Or I should say you can never have too many zip ties on a 3D printer. And then you don't want to get it so tight that you're pinching wires, but you want to get it tight enough where you can just kind of keep it held in there so things aren't moving around. Okay, I would give you guidance to go no more than 80 millimeters with this loom as far as the height goes, as it's measured from the top of the motor mount. That's what my other one is. So at this point, I've got enough loom on here. You can see the cut goes from the hot end, and it kind of nests in here a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this loom. Just make sure when you're trimming it that you don't get any wires. Okay, there we go. Okay, now might not be a bad time to dry fit this little piece here, just to make sure everything's fitting nice and tight, and then kind of check your movement. Make sure you can move everything manually. That seems good. Now we're ready to go ahead and wire the back. Okay, next we're just going to do finish off the tool head. The manual, the LDO manual, doesn't really cover all that, which is fine. It's pretty straightforward. But what you're basically going to do is connect everything as stated in the V0 manual. So I'm going to do the E motor. And then next I'm going to do the hot end fan. This is the one where the fan connections are a little weird. But I really like that they give you the right connectors. And there's only one way you can put these in, so you can't really screw it up. So this bigger connector with the one wire goes in, goes in like that. And then this other wire, hopefully it's got enough distance, goes in over here to this guy. So that's so it can do the PWM and turn it on and off. All right. And then as you go, just try to Keep things tidy and neat inside your channel if you can. I don't think it really matters too much, but it's good to have it clean and tidy. It makes it easier to work on, and certainly looks nicer. Although most people don't leave their back panels off, so you'll never really see it. All right, that's that part. Okay, so next up, I'm gonna go ahead and do the part fan. And if you look here, you can kind of see the order of things. So part cooling fan is this guy right here in the manual. So that's the top connector. And the nice thing is you can't screw up the polarity because it's wired the correct way, but you probably want to double check it. So black should be on bottom, red on top. There's nothing worse than a burnout fan on your new build. But I have not heard of these coming wired wrong. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and do, what's next? We can go ahead and do the heater, or we'll do the thermistor. So the hot end thermistor goes in this one all the way in the bottom, and it doesn't matter on the polarity. Even if it did, it's already connected for you. All right, now we've got the hot end heat. Polarity does not matter on this. We're gonna have to loosen up these spring terminals, but they go right here. And then just the X end stop, which is gonna go here. And you can see these are labeled too, which is nice. Unfortunately, the power ones aren't, and those are probably the most important ones. They are labeled on the other side, I believe. And now at this point, we've got all of the, we should have everything wired from the hot end and everything else that we've already wired. So now it's really just the motors remaining at this point. Okay, I went ahead and plugged in the Z motor, and then I had a lot of excess wire, so I went ahead and just buried it in this bottom rail. So that way it's out of the way. And after that, you just need the A and B motors. So the A motor is this guy right here, and that's gonna go in this spot. I do like that the LDO directions tell you which motor's which. And the B motor is gonna go right next to the A motor. And you're gonna use the loom for that, or the channel for that. And then if you wanna go ahead and cover things up, you should be able to do that right now, as long as everything is below your line. So it looks like mine's pretty good. And then you may also have to cut yours. Yeah, that's nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark where I need to cut it. And just like last time, I'm gonna just use a pair of heavy duty scissors to cut it right on the line there. Okay. I found that it's easier to slide this over than it is to snap it on. Okay. And before you power up, I just recommend looking everything over again, just double checking that everything's connected as expected. I just did that on mine, and I think I'm good to go. Just take your tube, and you're gonna feed it like this. And then I run it right up through here, through a little panel hole. And you can give yourself enough room. I think there's gonna be plenty of tube there. And then you're just going to go ahead and insert it in here. And then I like to run it all the way up front like that, so I can know kind of roughly where to zip tie it. And I'm just gonna follow the line on this. Okay, After you get everything wired up, it's time to start printing. Make sure you check the pre-flight checks link, and I'll list that in the description. But if you wired everything up, then you should be good to go, and happy printing.